The servers went dark in the middle of the company's biggest global launch. Alarms blared, screens flickered, and years of work seemed to vanish in seconds. The CEO stood frozen, watching everything collapse: the data, the investors' trust, his reputation. In that sterile, humming room, panic turned to silence. No one knew what to do. The IT team was helpless, and experts failed one after another. Just as despair settled in, a quiet voice from the back asked to try. No one expected the voice to belong to the Maid's 10-year-old son, a boy who had only come to wait for his mother. The company was one of the most powerful tech giants. In the city, a symbol of innovation and ambition. Inside its glass towers, the hum of machines blended with the quiet confidence of people who believed they ran the future. At the top of it all was the CEO, a man known for his precision and control. Every second of his day was planned, every decision calculated. Yet on that morning, everything he built trembled on the edge of collapse. The system failure hadn't just frozen screens. It had paralyzed millions of transactions across the globe. Investors were calling, staff were panicking, and in the chaos, blame quietly began to take shape. The board whispered about negligence, some pointed fingers at the IT department, and others looked for someone beneath them to absorb the fallout. Amid this storm, the cleaning staff moved silently through the corridors, invisible as always. Among them was Maria, the maid who had worked in the building for years, often arriving before dawn and leaving long after sunset. No one ever noticed her except when something needed fixing or cleaning. Her 10-year-old son, Jamal, sometimes waited in the corner after school, quietly reading or watching his mother sweep the same floors that executives walked on. That day, Jamal watched as grown men in suits argued, panicked, and failed to understand the lines of code flashing red on the screens. He didn't belong there, not in that room filled with authority and tension. But something in him stirred when he saw the error messages. They weren't random. They were familiar. He leaned forward, his curiosity ignited, his young mind piecing together patterns no one else seemed to notice. As Jamal studied the flickering screens, the weight of the room pressed down like a storm. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was the maid's son, a quiet shadow in a place that never looked his way. The executives barely registered his presence, their voices sharp and layered with frustration. Every minute of downtime meant millions lost, and desperation had started to breed cruelty. Fingers pointed, voices rose, and glances toward the lower staff carried an unspoken message. Someone beneath them would take the fall. Maria stood frozen by the doorway, torn between duty and fear. She had seen that look before. The look that said, "You don't belong here." Her son tugged gently at her sleeve, eyes wide with curiosity and concern. On the screen, lines of code scrolled endlessly, repeating an error that seemed impossible to fix. But to Jamal, it wasn't chaos. It was a puzzle. His small mind recognized patterns, sequences that others overlooked. It wasn't arrogance, just an instinct born from hours spent watching tutorials on his mother's old phone, trying to understand the language of machines. Meanwhile, the CEO felt the walls closing in. Every second stretched, every flicker of the monitors a reminder of his power slipping away. He had always prided himself on control, but control was slipping through his hands like sand. The IT experts murmured about data corruption, about system breaches, about irreversible loss. Each technical term was another nail in the coffin of his career. Then, through the haze of panic, Jamal stepped closer to one of the monitors. No one paid attention at first. A small boy in hand-me-down clothes didn't belong in a conversation about cybersecurity. But he stared at the code like it was a language only he could read. His brow furrowed, his mind raced, and somewhere deep inside, he felt a certainty that the problem wasn't the system itself, but the way it was connected. He whispered something to his mother, and she hesitated. Fear filled her eyes, fear of what would happen if her son spoke out, fear of crossing a line invisible yet always present. Years of quiet obedience taught her that people like them didn't interrupt people like those in suits. Yet Jamal's eyes held something different, something she hadn't seen before, a quiet fire, As another wave of system crashes rippled through the network, the CEO's last ounce of composure broke. Security was called to clear the lower staff from the floor. Non-essential personnel, they were told. Maria held her son close, ready to leave. But just before they turned away, one of the monitors flashed a new pattern of code, a sequence Jamal had seen before, one he knew how to fix. He froze mid-step, his eyes darting back to the screen. The boy who wasn't supposed to be part of the story had just spotted the key to saving it. Time felt suspended, the air heavy with failure and disbelief. The once proud boardroom was now a battlefield of fear and pride. Monitors blinked like dying stars, casting cold light across worried faces. The CEO stood motionless, surrounded by chaos, watching everything he'd built dissolve before his eyes. Then, from the edge of the room, came a faint sound, the clatter of small footsteps moving toward the central console. It was Jamal. He stopped before the glowing screens, their rapid code reflecting in his eyes. For a moment, it was as if the noise of the room faded, replaced by the quiet hum of focus. His small fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitant but confident. His mother's voice trembled as she tried to stop him, but something in the boy's presence silenced her. And the room. The IT team watched, half in disbelief, half in annoyance, their skepticism wrapped in polite smirks. He typed quickly, his movements purposeful yet fluid, as though he had done this 100 times in his mind. Every command he entered seemed to bring the system back from the brink, one flicker at a time. Lines of green replaced the walls of red. Servers whirred back to life. Slowly, impossibly, the chaos began to fade. No one spoke. The room filled with the sound of humming machines and the collective breath of those who couldn't comprehend what they were seeing. When the system dashboard finally stabilized, a wave of relief rippled across the team, but it was followed by something else. Silence. The kind that carried realization. The CEO stared at the boy, not with disbelief, but with something more profound, the heavy, humbling weight of truth. The person who had saved his company wasn't an engineer, wasn't a consultant, and wasn't even on the payroll. It was the child of a woman he'd never once noticed. A boy the system itself had written off before he even had a chance to begin. When the final screen turned green, the room erupted in a strange, stunned quiet, relief mixed with disbelief. The disaster that could have ended the company had been averted by a child who wasn't even supposed to be there. Slowly, people began to breathe again, but no one quite knew how to react. Pride, shame, and awe blended in the air like smoke that refused to clear. Maria stood behind her son, her hands trembling, unsure whether to pull him away or protect him from the sudden attention. For years, she had cleaned these offices unnoticed, her face blending into the walls, her work invisible but essential. Now every eye in the room was on her child, the boy they had overlooked, the boy who had seen what they couldn't. The CEO approached, each step slower than the last, burdened by a realization that went far beyond computer systems. He saw, maybe for the first time, how blind he had been, not just to the people who cleaned his floors, but to the quiet brilliance hidden behind the faces society often ignores. The same system that had nearly destroyed his company mirrored the one outside these walls, a system built to favor some and forget others. He offered words of gratitude, but they felt small compared to what the moment demanded. The applause that followed was polite, uncertain, more about redemption than celebration. Yet Jamal didn't need their approval. He had already proven something much larger, that talent, intelligence, and worth don't wear uniforms, don't come with titles, and don't need permission to shine. As Maria led her son out of the building, sunlight spilled across the polished lobby floors. The same steps she once scrubbed now reflected the image of a boy who had rewritten more than just a line of code. He had rewritten the story of who gets to matter, and as the CEO watched them disappear into the light, one question lingered like a quiet echo in the silence they left behind. How many more geniuses have we failed to see simply because we never looked in their direction?